And so here is General Wesley Clark, and he lets the truth slip here in 2007, explaining what the goal of the neocons who were in power at the time, what their goal was in the long run. Because this is a nefarious subplot going on, which is steering all of U.S. foreign policy. Here's what he says.
10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Wow. Long-term, long-standing plan that they're clearly still rolling out. Shout out to The Daily Show for putting together this compilation. This isn't even every time he said, "Oh, Iran is a couple months from getting a nuclear weapon." This is only some of the times he said this. Watch.
Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year. It could be within a few months.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly if they wanted to do it.
Iran is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the rich uranium for an atom bomb. Iran is gearing up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade. Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years.
If not stopped.
So let's also point out that obviously all of this is untrue. But the implication here is, well, if Iran gets a nuke, obviously they're going to launch on Cleveland immediately. And that's just total horseshit. This is the same sort of thing they did with the war in Iraq. They implied heavily, or in some circumstances outright said, "Oh, if Saddam has a nuke, he's going to attack us." That was all made up. Guys, Kim Jong-un of North Korea has nukes. Has he nuked anybody yet? No. Effectively, he has it, and it serves as a deterrent. So now, the West can't overthrow him because that would mean he'd launch on Seoul, South Korea, and kill hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And so they know, all right, we can't really do anything. Like, we just have to deal with the existence of the state of North Korea. And it's a similar circumstance here, that if Iran had nukes, it would be to establish deterrence to make it so that Israel can't overthrow them and the U.S. can't overthrow them. Because as we speak right now, who's waging more wars, Iran or Israel? Well, Israel's literally doing a genocide in Gaza as we speak, killing hundreds of people per day. They're bombing Lebanon. They're bombing Yemen. They're bombing Syria and taking over large swaths of Syria. They're taking over parts of the West Bank. They just did a total siege on the West Bank. So every part of the narrative from top to bottom is just completely and utterly wrong. Now, again, we are at the point in this propaganda buildup to war with Iran where you have some of the exact same arguments that are being trotted out that were used against Saddam Hussein. So here is George W. Bush in the lead up to the Iraq war. This is incredible, guys. Listen to what he says here.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists. Either you're with us, either you love freedom and with nations which embrace freedom, or you're with the enemy. You're either with us or you're with the enemy. That's clear. I will continue to make that clear.
Now, again, remember, in retrospect, everybody knows the Iraq war was stupid. The Iraq war was based on lies. The Iraq war destroyed the region, led to thousands of our own troops dying, led to all these problems. The Middle East was broken. The rise of ISIS, every single part of it from top to bottom was a failure. This was the argument that was deployed at the time to try to make people shut up and fall in line. And if you criticize the war, what they would do is say, why are you criticizing the troops? Why do you hate the troops? Why do you hate the United States of America? Poop face, poop. Well, guess what? Just like George W. Bush said this year, now we got Mark Levin the man with the most annoying voice on TV, by the way, and he's out there making this exact same argument.
Yeah, so where are they? They're nowhere. How about China? Nowhere. How about Russia? Nowhere. What happened to World War III? There is no World War III. They all sound like a bunch of Marxist Islamists. They don't sound like patriotic Americans. Let me be clear. This is good versus evil. You're either a patriotic American who's going to get behind the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, or you're not.
You're either with us or you're with the terrorist. You're either a patriotic American that gets behind the president, or you're not. The exact same playbook. By the way, look at this. Tulsi Gabbard, the head of intelligence, came out, I believe it was in March, and said the intelligence community has come to the conclusion that Iran is not building a nuke. That's what she said. Well, Trump was just asked about that, and he goes, I don't care what she says. I don't care what she says. I say they are close to a nuke. So she can go away. There was some snide comment just swatting aside the conclusion of his own intelligence agencies. Well, now further validation on that. Israel built its case for war with Iran on new intelligence. The U.S. didn't buy it. American spy agencies stand by their assessment that Iran hasn't decided to build a nuclear weapon, but Trump now says Tehran is very close. So our own intelligence agencies are now leaking to the media. They're not building a fucking nuke. And Trump's like, I don't care. I want to go to war anyway. This is incredible. And in some ways, this is the mirror image of what happened in 2003, where you had U.S. intelligence saying, or at least rogue elements within U.S. intelligence saying, Iraq does have a nuke. And then you had Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and all these assholes go out there and aggressively make the case for 2 years, by the way, that, we have to overthrow Saddam because he's a direct threat to us. I got another example, though. This is what Ted Cruz said just yesterday about war with Iran. And then you're going to see it compared to what George W. Bush said in 2002 about Iraq. Again, this is incredible.
If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, I think the odds are unacceptably high that we would find out with a mushroom cloud over New York City or Los Angeles.
We cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
History repeats itself. Literally the exact same bullshit talking points. And people expect you to believe this. People expect you to break out the pom-poms and go, hooray, regime change in Iran, yippee skippy. What are we doing, bro?